because things have declined and because we're in COVID, there has been this, you're probably familiar with the Barna survey, 30% of Christians are no longer going to church. Once COVID hit, they left the church and they're not going online and they're not coming back. 30%, a third. So that's a big wake-up call to a lot of people. So we have systems that are not working. And I would dare say a lot of the systems is because millennials in Zoom, Gen Zs, are looking at churches and just going, it's just a power play. It's just a power play. And they're just saying, I'm not even interested. So they don't want the church with a 10-foot pole. Prior to the Barna research on nuns, right? The increase of nuns. So you have this increase of people who are saying, I'm not religious at all. And now you've got 30% of people who said they were religious no longer going to church. So there's a rock and a hard place. And as I'm coaching leaders all over the country, and that's one of my main things. I set up the coaching networks and I set up the coaching systems. When I coach leaders, it's pretty consistent across the board. People are checking out. And so our segmented systems are not enough to gain their imagination again. We're going to have to unite if we intend at all to get the imagination of this next generation. And I would submit that being able to work with brothers and sisters to realize, to at least agree upon some primary issues of the gospel, but then recognize that a lot of things we say are primary are actually secondary. And there are a lot of very smart people who land on very different positions on those secondary issues. So the more that you can identify that, then the more you can work together on the things you can. Once again, I think the thing that grips me is you have different denominations, different theological assumptions, who are willing to identify the main things and put aside the other things. Complementarians are willing to work with women pastors, and women pastors are willing to not demonize complementarians. And you got, this is what it takes, and to be able to get to know each other. And then once you know someone and you realize, oh gosh, I mean, they love their children too, then it really creates bridges that otherwise are not there. I don't know how theologically different we really are anymore, Tom. I would say we might be ecclesiastically, church-wise different. But theologically, we're a lot more alike than we would admit. So if we could just, so this brings another thing. We have to have, this is why I think the gospel dynamics are so important. The gospel tells me I'm a lot more messed up than I want to admit. David Whitehead, Pastor David Whitehead, is a lot more messed up than I want to admit. But I'm far more loved than I could ever dream. And you put those two things together, the tension of those two realities, that creates the power to give me a humility to recognize I don't know it all, but also a boldness, knowing that I'm accepted and loved, all at the same time. Now, if we could do that, then that might help our Pentecostal brothers tone down the language of spirit-filled. Because I tell you, there are a lot of Baptists who, they may not pray in tongues, but man, you look at what they're doing in missions, I'd say they're pretty spirit-filled. Okay? And I would also look at if we could get our Presbyterian brothers, Reformed, of which I'm part of that Reformed tradition, to recognize Reformed theology is just one way to explain the mystery. It's not the end. It's not the period at the end of a sentence. It's simply the invitation into a mystery. That should create the humility we need. And there are plenty more. I'm just bringing those out. That could create the humility we need to actually work together. That I would start seeing my Baptist brother as a peer and not as a project. And then we could focus on the kingdom. And I guess one of the things, just like New York has been antagonistic to the gospel, I see the United States becoming more and more antagonistic to the gospel. I would submit this is a great opportunity for unity. The Lutherans aren't going to get it all. So invest into a Baptist church. And they're not going to get it all. They're predestined to invest in a Presbyterian church who chooses to invest into a charismatic church? It's an expansive challenge that's not easy. It's painful at times. It's got lots of mess. But if we're willing to embrace the mess, I think we can see tremendous results. Part of the dilemma is we want the church to be like a Christian bookstore, nice and clean. And one of my favorite scriptures is when the manger, where there are no oxen, the manger is clean, but there's much profit in labor. Means I am for messy mangers, because that means things are getting done. I believe if churches would start realizing that they are not the end in themselves, but they are an outpost of the kingdom. When Jesus came, he said the kingdom's in our midst. Huge, right? God's already working. Can the church, instead of trying to set up a system, can the church come and simply ask, Lord, where are you working here? And then respond.